So Overlord Season 3 has finally come to an end, and this time around they fit yet another 3 whole light novels into 13 short episodes. You can imagine that trying to compress 800 or so pages of story into a single season's worth of anime would result in a lot of details and events to be glossed over or skipped completely. So for this episode of Cut Content, I'm going to approach this a bit more systematic Season 3. But before we start though, don't forget that the Succubase shirts are still available to buy and you can get them from the link in the description. Now, let's begin. The first event to skip quite a bit of relevant information would be this scene with Mare, Shaltir, Albedo, and her bicorn. This actually takes place on the 6th floor of Nazarick, and during their little conversation, they also go visit a nearby village that now houses non-human denizens that were once inhabitants of the Great Forest of Tob. You know, the area surrounding Nazarick? Ainz had ordered for good-natured heteromorphs that were self-sufficient to be permitted to enter Nazarick, become part of this village, and grow outside food in order to increase sustainability and reduce operations costs. Of course, that wasn't the only reason for it though. It was also an experiment of sorts to integrate members of various races into Nazarick's day-to-day operations, referred to by Ainz as Project Utopia. A twofold plan that is also an act or charade for the outside world, meant to demonstrate that Nazarick is capable of coexisting peacefully with the rest of them. Well, at least that's how the plan was interpreted by Demiurge and Albedo. In actuality, all Ainz had really said was that he wanted to collect various monsters, but after a little bit of brainstorming between two of the smartest beings in existence, they finally realized what Ainz's words really meant, and as per usual, marvel at the genius of his plan, as well as sing various praises to its unfathomable depth. In another sequence of events, we follow Mare through a journey across Nazarick as he's given a task by Pulcinella to relay information. Ainz wanted to test a simple messaging system that could inform various floor guardians of random events and minor news, without him needing to go through the hassle of summoning them or interrupting their work. That was it. A simple plan that Ainz had thought was rather ingenious to aid communication between Nazarick. Of course, all the other NPCs take it far more seriously. This time around, the message from Ainz simply asked for the number of guardians that would be attending the bathhouse later that night. A simple yes or no response that needed to be passed on to all the male floor guardians. Because of this, Pulcinella told Mare not to tell his sister, simply because it wasn't necessary. But due to the broken telephone effect, Mare treated this as some sort of top secret mission to deliver this information pamphlet to the next guardian on the list without informing any of the female guardians. So this basically turns into Mare running all around Nazarick trying to deliver this message, which allows us to learn more about various areas and floors of the tomb. Since Cocytus was the next in line to receive the message, Mare visits the 5th floor where we're told of a snowy hellscape with a raging blizzard, populated by powerful ice and snow monsters. Upon entering the region where Cocytus lives, he encounters 6 level 82 ice monsters called Frost Virgins, who tell Mare that Cocytus is visiting the Lizardmen village, meaning that in order for Mare to reach Cocytus, he would have to travel outside of Nazarick. But after Shaltir had been compromised, Ainz made a rule that no guardian could leave Nazarick without being accompanied by a selection of high-level guards to defend them. Now, normally, Mare would ask Aura for these guards, but having been sworn to keep the matter secret from his sister, he teleports to the 10th floor and goes to the Great Library Ashurbanipal to request assistance from one of Demiurge's minions. In this library, we can find 5 types of books: monster data to summon mercenary vassals, spell books allowing for those who read them to cast a particular spell, class change items granting readers/users access to a particular class, visual data books used by crafters to change item skins, and finally, actual books. These could be lore books created by the dev team, popular novels whose copyright expired, or even player-made books and guides. If you remember when Mare first received the information pamphlet, she was holding one of said books and decided to return it back to the library. Incidentally, it was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. As Mare wanders the halls, he's interrupted by an apparition called Librarian J, a ghost with a rotting face that's shrouded by a hood. It's a member of the races known as White Counterfeiters, a ghostly variant of the Elderlich race. This apparition escorts Mare to the head librarian, Titus Aeneas Secundus, who at the time was producing scrolls for Demiurge. He's a skeletal mage with classes specialized for crafting spells, scrolls, and magical items. So Titus accepts Mare's request and loans him 5 overlords of the library: Cocheus, Ulpius, Elius, Fulvius, and Aurelius. each named after famous Roman emperors. These overlords were mentioned to be far too powerful for the library. Spending all their time cleaning and dusting wasn't something really suited to their builds, so it would have been appreciated to give them a chance to be useful to the Supreme Ones. In return though, the librarian asks him for help in a scroll creation experiment, instructing him to cast any 4th level spell. Titus gathers the parchment and gold coins needed to create the scroll, then has Mare cast the spell. Unfortunately, the scroll bursts into flames and burns to a cinder. This was an expected result by the librarian, and he comments that it must be impossible to create 4th tier scrolls with the quality of parchment that he's using, also noting that a 10-year-old was a failure. As you may recall from before, this is a statement referring to the source of the parchment, Demiurge's Happy Farm. And if you somehow don't know what I'm talking about, then you need to go watch my Demiurge video right away. Having now earned his high-level bodyguards, Mare teleports to the surface and goes to the Lizardmen village, which then shows us a bit of insight towards what has happened to the Lizardmen since their subjugation. The first thing that Mare encounters is a lifelike stone and metal statue dedicated to Ainz built as a shrine to their new overlord. It's surrounded by the highest quality offerings of flowers and food, which really pleased Mare. The village itself was far more advanced and developed than it had ever been, and its defenses now consisted of fences and watchtowers manned and patrolled by Nazarick soldiers. Each Lizardman had a medal with the Ainz symbol around their neck, marking them as protected vassals and servants of Nazarick. Mare is then directed to the brother of the protagonist Lizardman from Season 2. Turns out that Ainz delivered on his promise to resurrect him too. By the orders of Cocytus, he had been put in charge of the construction of a fish farm in order to increase the sustainability of the Lizardmen village by avoiding food shortages. If not for Nazarick's initial assistance, the Lizardmen village would have suffered an extreme food shortage since every single tribe bordered a single lake. A magic item that produces a large amount of food each day, called Dagda's Cauldron, was given to them. When Mare asks of Cocytus's whereabouts, he's told that Cocytus is leading a new expedition to subjugate the Toadmen with some subordinates and trainee Lizardmen. So Mare would end up having to wait, and the scene concludes there. As we move on now, we get into more of Enri's scenes with Carne village. The next cut bit wasn't really an entire scene, but rather just a bit of context. There was a rather long conversation between Britta, Enri, Neferia, and the goblins, regarding the problems being stirred up in the forest that was heavily abridged in the anime. It's basically the whole backstory about the 3 great monsters of the forest: the beast to the south, the giant of the east, and the serpent of the west. The giant and the serpent, while eager to go to war with each other, would not dare fight seriously with each other or the beast, since there was always the possibility that should the 2 of the great 3 powers fight, the third could swoop in the last minute and finish them both off in their moment of weakness. However, since the beast usually kept to its territory, there was very little chance that either 2 could ally against the third. There was no chance for either party to secure an alliance with the beast, but also no need to band together to defeat it since it kept to itself. Not that the giant and the serpent would even consider allying in the first place. This unsteady arrangement had reigned for quite some time until 2 unfortunate events had occurred. The first was the appearance of the Monument of Destruction, a dangerous new place in the middle of the forest ruled by undead who indiscriminately slaughtered any intruders. The second was the disappearance of the beast, who just up and vanished one day and never returned. This had shifted the power balance of the forest, and the risk of the situation became clear to the village. Should they be attacked by a large group of powerful creatures, the wall might not hold, and the village defense force would be too undermanned, under-equipped, and underpowered to deal with a protracted siege of a large enemy force already capable of destroying the walls. Lupus suggests asking Ainz for help, but since he's already done so much for them, they didn't want to become a hindrance by begging for help in solving every little problem. Neferia suggests hiring adventurers, but that was also turned down due to being far too expensive. As you know already though, Enri ends up traveling to Irantel anyway, and what they had cut out from this was the scenes leading up to her arrest and interrogation at the gates. At first, the goblins are left behind so that they wouldn't be killed on sight, so Enri, being this lone female traveler, had attracted the attention and concern of a few soldiers stationed at the gate. What was even more suspicious was the powerful warhorse pulling the cart that she was driving, an animal entirely outside of her financial capabilities. given Henry's nonchalant and carefree attitude as well, this was something very unbefitting of a lone traveler who would naturally be a nervous wreck the entire journey. Both the guards and his partner suspected her of being a powerful spellcaster, disguising herself as a village girl. So as it would turn out, Henry's plan to slip into Irel without attracting too much attention didn't go quite as planned, as she ended up being escorted to a blockhouse for interrogation by a magician on retainer in the Magician's Guild. Everything from that point was rather similar, but what they didn't show was how Ainz ended up in Irel as well. If you remember, because Ainz as Momo had vouched for Henry, she was allowed into the city, but the anime had cut out Ainz's journey into Irel, which didn't really contain any significant plot points, but did have Overlord's signature humor, so I figure it's worth sharing. Typical Ainz wanted to continue building the renown of Momo and continue acquiring finances for Nazarick, which meant that he was forced to regularly undertake Adventurers Guild quests. At first, this was seen by Ainz as a great opportunity to take a break from administering Nazarick, but after a while he just came to view them as nothing but boring work. His process involves completing the quest in as little time as possible, then teleporting back to Nazarick for a while before returning to the guild. Though in this particular instance, returning back to Nazarick was definitely out of the question. In fact, he was desperately trying to escape from his duties as the Overlord. Why, you may ask? Well, this. Because Albedo decided to pretty much molest Ainz, he didn't want to be anywhere near Nazarick for a few days. As he approaches the gates of Irel, he looks up at it, and his heart swells with indescribable emotion. He had always wondered why guilds in Yggdrasil would capture and use cities as their guild bases, simply due to how difficult it would be to defend them. But now, he felt as if he understood. Maybe ruling a great city could be fun. So we have Momon, Nabe, and Hamsuke waiting in line to get into the city. There seems to be a longer than usual backlog of people, but Ainz casually passes the time by conversing with Hamsuke on her training with the undead. Ainz wanted to experiment to see how people learn martial arts. Though the undead were tireless beings and could train non-stop, neither Hamsuke nor the Death Knights were able to learn them. In any case, Ainz would normally continue to wait in line until he reached the front. Of course, adamantite adventurers usually get waved right through the gates. After all, they were great assets to any city or kingdom. But this time, the abnormal wait times caused him to lose his patience, and he gained a bit of curiosity as to what was causing the holdup. As he makes his way to the front, he overhears an ongoing interrogation and comes across Henry as the unfortunate subject. He calls out to Henry by name, which was a little blunder on his part since technically Momon and Henry have never met before. This is where Ainz starts questioning several things, since he has no idea what Henry is there for. Is she looking for Ainz? For Momon? Does she recognize his voice? Was she able to deduce his identity from it? He doesn't want her to talk any more than is necessary, so as we saw, he vouches for Henry's release simply on the basis that he knows her. Henry then enters the city, and Nabe gets told to find out why she's there. Henry had needed to visit the Adventurers Guild, but as to why was a whole nother mystery to Ainz. Ainz grows a little bit anxious because this knowledge should have become well known to him much earlier from Lupus. Now, in order to not draw attention to himself while deducing the reasons for Henry's visit, he uses some adamantite class adventurer privileges that allow him to enter the Adventurers Guild through the back door. Normally, Ainz wouldn't take advantage of these privileges, as to not tarnish his reputation. But in this case, it was really important that he and Henry didn't meet face to face. This is where we come across the Guildmaster Ainzak, who welcomes Ainz with a big smile and a huge hug, clearly playing up his friendliness in order to endear himself to Ainz, who at this point is pretty much a local celebrity. Ainz usually resents this type of informality and closeness, but he tries his best to be polite and not show it. Indeed though, the friendliness is so suffocating that Ainz has a brief thought, is he gay? Wait, does he think that I'm gay? Eventually, Ainz gets around to asking about Henry's request. Normally, the Adventurers Guild would have fairly strict control over what information they'd share in order to maintain confidentiality and avoid conflicts, and Ainz isn't really one for breaking these rules either. But of course, being an adamantite adventurer makes the guild a bit more willing to bend said rules. Ainz goes ahead and phrases it as humbly and politely as possible, leaving room for Ainzak to reject his request without any offense. Still though, Ainzak couldn't very well back down after his previous display of friendliness, and he promises to look into the request. He returns after a bit with the receptionist, who's visibly agitated. If you remember from the anime, the receptionist wasn't very interested in the request, and she coldly chased Henry away by bringing up the fees. Both her and the guildmaster now assume that they have insulted a close friend of an adamantite adventurer, and they were worried that Ainz would get offended by this. So the receptionist is making up excuses, while the guildmaster is trying to throw the receptionist under the bus to make himself look better. This was a standard tactic that Ainz was able to easily pick up on since it was used so often in his past life as a salaryman, a boss viciously reprimanding an employee in front of a customer in order to gain favor. Ainz comforted the receptionist and said that he wouldn't hold it against her before sending her back out to retrieve the rest of the information. Following those events in Irel, everything is rather similar up until the epilogue where a bunch of minor scenes were shortened and cut. But first, we need to clarify something. I'm sure that you were able to piece together from the anime that Ainz had organized the attack on Carne village. He ordered the Naga's remaining minions, along with the final trolls and a zombified goo armed with a magic greatsword to do so. He then tells Lupus Regina to defend the VIPs in order to test her ability to follow his orders properly. This much we know. What they didn't tell you is that Ainz figured the magic weapon that he gave Goo would be useful in the hands of someone from Carne village, so he made sure to send it over gift wrapped in the hands of a troll. Yeah, so Ainz casually set up a false flag operation against Carne village to test its ability to withstand sieges, make sure Lupus Regina is capable of following orders, and deliver a powerful magic sword. There was also one other reason involving Nefaria, and proving a point to convince Nefaria that he should keep his potion creation tasks a secret. But that's not made clear until after Henry and Nefaria visit Nazarick, which is an event in itself that needs discussing. Yuri Alpha, being one of the remaining humanoid maids not currently occupied, was tasked with accompanying and escorting Henry, Nefaria, and Nemu to Nazarick. It came as a shock to Nefaria when Yuri pulls out a magic item that allows for instant teleportation, something that Nefaria didn't even know to exist up until that point. The fact that Yuri wasn't a spellcaster, yet still able to use such a magic item was an even more amazing feat, since, well, creating a magic item requires mastery of both the spell involved and item creation magic. Once the item is activated, a giant wardrobe appears before Yuri, and her guests are told to walk through the dimensional portal inside, possibly a reference to C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. Nefaria tries to relate the spell to a more advanced version of Pocket Space, which allows the user to hold small items in a pocket dimension and retrieve them later. But he can't even begin to speculate how one could teleport individuals over long distances. After all, teleportation is a 5th tier spell, but its distance is limited. As Nefaria enters the new area with the others, he catches a brief glimpse of Sakura petals and a Miko Shrine Maiden before meeting Ainz. This was a reference to a minor character that has been completely cut from the anime, but is known as the 7th member of the Pleiades sisters, Irel Omega. She's the area guardian of the Cherry Blossom Sanctuary and is in charge of overseeing the teleportation gates. Even at this point in the source material though, we still don't know that much about her, but I think it would have been a nice little Easter egg to see her briefly in the anime. Anyway, these were some of the most major cuts from the light novel. Of course, there were some other minor cuts that gave more context or greater details, but they're not entirely essential to the story. A few examples would be the fact that Ainz gave the homunculus maids who cleaned Nazarick vacation days, because he reasoned that their working conditions would be unethical if it were demanded by any corporation. A decision that relays the point that Ainz is constantly trying to run Nazarick like some sort of company. Or say the entire squad layout for Henry's Goblin Troop, complete with names, levels, and roles. There was also one scene from this arc that I don't think that the anime got quite right, and that was when Ainz had called Lupus in for questioning regarding the negligence to report the events happening at Carne village. Ainz was supposed to explode with an anger so intense that his emotional suppression wouldn't even stop it. Lupus was supposed to spend the entire scene gripped with terror and apologetics. She was so heartbroken and shocked that she could barely stammer out her sentences properly for the next 15 minutes. Everyone in the room was supposed to be trembling as Ainz berated Lupus, but instead all the attention was just removed. But yeah, that was pretty much it for the first arc. Now before I go, just one more plug of my Succubase shirt. If you're interested, you can get it from the Teespring link in the description. Now, thank you all so much for watching till the end. I know these Overlord videos are very far and few between, but Djinnfor and I do try to put a lot of work into them, so I really appreciate the fact that you were able to sit through the entire video. Now, until next time, ciao! Oh, Pandora's Actors Part 2 is next.